If you refuse to go to Shady Pines Nursing Home, then you can pack your bags and get out of my house right now. My son Marcus screamed, his face inches from mine, spittle flying from his lips in a rage I had never seen before. I did not cry and I did not beg. I simply smoothed the front of my dress, walked to the door, and made one phone call. An hour later, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom, worth more than this entire neighborhood, pulled up to the curb. When the uniformed chauffeur stepped out and bowed to me like royalty, the arrogant smirk on my son's face vanished instantly. My name is Odessa Mae Washington. I am 72 years old, and this is the story of how I reminded my ungrateful children exactly who I am. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you are watching from and subscribe to the Never Too Old channel. We are creating a community of people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now back to the story. The sound was deafening, a chaotic crash of leather and metal tumbling down the hardwood stairs. My vintage leather suitcase, the one I had carried across Europe 30 years ago, landed at my feet with a sickening thud. The clasp burst open. My neatly folded cardigans, my worn leather Bible, and the small velvet jewelry box containing my late husband's pearls scattered across the entryway floor. A ceramic picture frame holding a photo of Marcus as a baby shattered against the baseboard, sending shards of glass skittering across the wood. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my hand instinctively reaching up to touch the golden brooch on my collar, a habit I had developed whenever I needed to steady my nerves. I did not bend down to pick up the mess. Instead, I slowly lifted my head to look at the top of the landing. Marcus stood there, gripping the banister so hard his knuckles were white. He was 42 years old, but in that moment, he looked like an oversized toddler having a tantrum. His polo shirt was stretched tight over a stomach that had grown soft from too much beer and too little work. His face was flushed a deep, unhealthy red, and his chest heaved as if he had just run a marathon. There was no love in his eyes. There was no recognition of the mother who had worked double shifts to pay for his college tuition, or the woman who had nursed him through pneumonia when he was 6. There was only disgust. "Do you hear me?" Mother Marcus bellowed, his voice cracking with the strain. "Tiffany cannot take it anymore, and neither can I. This house is not a charity hospital. The paperwork for Shady Pines is on the counter. The shuttle bus will be here at 8 tomorrow morning. You either get on that bus or you pick up your trash and walk out that front door tonight." I looked at him, really looked at him. I had spent 40 years as a nursing director in some of the toughest hospitals in Atlanta. I had stared down arrogant surgeons and calmed violent patients. A weak man like Marcus could not intimidate me. "Marcus," I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through the humidity of the Georgia evening, "you seem to have forgotten something very important. This house, the roof over your head, was purchased with the money from the sale of my estate. $300,000 in cash, Marcus. You promised me a suite in this home for the rest of my life." "That was 5 years ago," Marcus shouted, waving his hand dismissively as he stomped down the first few steps. "The economy has changed. Inflation is eating us alive. You do not contribute a dime to the household expenses anymore. You just sit there drinking your tea and taking up space. That room in the basement, Tiffany needs it. She needs a yoga studio. We need room to breathe, Mother. Can you not understand that we are suffocating?" I almost laughed. He was talking about needing room to breathe in a 4-bedroom house that I had essentially paid for, but I saw the truth in his eyes. This was not about space. It was not about inflation. It was about cruelty. It was about discarding something he felt had no more value. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Marcus?" I asked one final time. "Because once I walk out that door, I will never cross this threshold again. And I will take everything that belongs to me with me." "Go!" he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the heavy oak door. "Just go. Take your old lady smell and your judgment and get out. I am sick of pretending to be the good son." "Honey, you do not need to scream. She is probably deaf anyway, remember?" The voice floated in from the kitchen, syrupy sweet, but laced with arsenic. Tiffany stepped into the hallway. She was holding a large glass of white wine, leaning against the doorframe, with the relaxed posture of someone watching a reality TV show rather than her husband evicting his own mother. Tiffany was a pharmacist. She wore that title like a crown. She was petite blonde and always impeccably dressed, presenting the image of the perfect suburban wife to the neighbors. But behind closed doors, she looked at me the way one looks at a cockroach that refuses to die. She walked over to Marcus and placed a manicured hand on his shoulder, looking down at my scattered belongings with a sneer. "Odessa," she said, dropping the title of Mrs. Washington that I had earned. "Please do not make this harder on Marcus. We have tried our best, but your medical condition, honestly, it is just too much for a young couple to handle." "Condition?" I asked, keeping my face impassive. "I am perfectly healthy, Tiffany. My blood pressure is lower than yours, and my mind is sharper than both of yours combined." Tiffany giggled a high, brittle sound that grated on my ears. She looked up at Marcus and winked. "See, honey, she is hallucinating again. Denial is the first stage of dementia. Odessa, did you forget about this morning, the wet sheets? That was the third time this week. The smell of urine, it is soaking into my $5,000 Italian sofa. We cannot live like this." My blood ran cold. I knew for a fact I did not have incontinence issues. My bladder control was fine. But for the last month, every time I took the special vitamins Tiffany brought home from her pharmacy, I felt groggy. I felt my body losing control. I was a nurse. I knew physiology. And suddenly, looking at her triumphant smile, the pieces clicked into place. She was not just mean. She was dosing me. "You are right, Tiffany," I said, bending down to slowly pick up my Bible and place it back in the suitcase. "There is a terrible stench in this house, but it is not coming from me. It is coming from the rot in your souls." Tiffany's smile vanished instantly. Her face hardened into a mask of pure malice. "You crazy old witch," she hissed. "You think you are someone special? You are just a leech. Your money ran out years ago. You have zero value to us. Get out of my house before I call the cops and have you dragged out for trespassing." Marcus stood there silent and cowardly, letting his wife speak to his mother like a criminal. He was terrified of her. He would sell his own soul to keep her happy. "Very well," I said. I snapped the latches of my suitcase shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent hallway. "I will go. But remember this moment. Burn it into your memory. Because one day when you are on your knees begging, I want you to remember exactly how you looked tonight." I reached into my handbag and pulled out my phone. I dialed a single number. "Reginald?" I said into the receiver, my eyes never leaving Tiffany's face. "Initiate Protocol Phoenix. Come and get me, now." I dragged my heavy suitcase out onto the front porch. The Atlanta humidity hit me instantly, thick and cloying. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the manicured lawn I had paid to have landscaped. Marcus and Tiffany did not close the door. They stood in the doorway, arms crossed, wine glasses in hand, waiting for the finale. They wanted to see me humbled. They wanted to see me call a rundown taxi, or worse, watch me drag my luggage down the street to the bus stop like a vagrant. "Do you need me to call you an Uber mom?" Marcus called out, his voice dripping with fake pity. "I can call the pool option. It is cheaper. You need to save every penny for the nursing home." Tiffany laughed, sipping her wine. "Or maybe we should call animal control. Stray cats usually get picked up pretty fast in this neighborhood." I stood tall, adjusting the silk scarf around my neck. I did not respond. I simply checked my watch. 45 minutes. Reginald was never late. From the end of the street, a pair of distinct blue-tinted LED headlights cut through the gathering dusk. A vehicle turned onto our quiet cul-de-sac. It moved with a silent, predatory grace, the engine a low purr that whispered of immense power and engineering perfection. It was not a taxi. It was not a bus. It was not an ambulance. A Rolls-Royce Phantom jet, black and gleaming under the streetlights, glided toward the house. It was massive, imposing a vehicle that commanded immediate respect. The Spirit of Ecstasy ornament on the hood caught the porch light and sparkled like a diamond. The smirk fell off Tiffany's face so fast it was almost comical. Marcus's hand shook sloshing wine onto his wrist. They stood there, mouths agape, eyes wide, looking like two fish gasping for air on a dock. The car came to a smooth halt right in front of the driveway. The driver's door opened. A tall African-American man in a pristine black suit and white gloves stepped out. It was James. My personal driver from 20 years ago, a man Marcus had never met, because I had always kept my true business life separate from my family to teach them humility. Clearly, that lesson had failed. James walked around the massive vehicle, ignoring Marcus and Tiffany completely. He approached me and bowed a sharp, respectful 45-degree angle. "Good evening, Mrs. Washington," James said, his voice deep and echoing with reverence. "Mr. Graves is waiting for you at the penthouse. The champagne is chilled, and the staff is ready for your arrival." "Thank you, James," I said softly, handing him the handle of my battered suitcase. James took the old leather bag with both hands, as if it were the crown jewels of England. He carried it to the trunk and placed it inside with gentle care. I turned back to look at my son and his wife one last time. Their faces had drained of color. Tiffany was stuttering, clutching Marcus's arm. "Marcus?" she whispered loud enough for me to hear. "What is that? Is that a Rolls-Royce? Marcus, did your mother win the lottery?" "Mom," Marcus stepped down one stair, his voice trembling, his eyes glued to the car. "What is going on? Who is that? Where are you going?" I put on my sunglasses even though it was dark. It felt appropriate. "That is none of your business anymore, Marcus," I said, my voice cold as ice. "You just evicted me. You made your choice. From this moment on, we are strangers." I turned, and James opened the rear suicide door of the Phantom. The interior glowed with soft ambient lighting and cream leather. I stepped inside and settled into the seat. The door closed with a solid, heavy thud, sealing me off from the humidity, the smell of cheap wine, and the stench of betrayal. As the car pulled away, I watched them in the rearview mirror. Two small, confused figures shrinking into the darkness, realizing too late that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The game had just begun. The silence inside the Phantom was heavy, broken only by the soft fizz of champagne as Reginald poured 2 flutes of Dom Perignon. He handed me the crystal glass, his dark eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and knowing. He did not say "I told you so," but the words hung in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. I took a long sip, letting the cold liquid settle my nerves. "I know Reggie," I said, staring into the pale gold bubbles. "You warned me 5 years ago. You told me not to liquidate the Buckhead estate. You told me that money changes people." My mind drifted back to that fatal error in judgment. I had owned a sprawling 5-bedroom estate, a monument to the success my late husband and I had built over 40 years. It was mortgage-free. It was my sanctuary. But Marcus had come to me eyes wide and pleading, talking about school districts for the children they never had and the need for a fresh start. So I sold it. I sold my memories, and I handed Marcus a check for $300,000. It was the down payment for the house I had just been evicted from. I remembered Tiffany on the day of the closing. She was a different person then, or perhaps she was just a better actress. She sat across from me at the bank, her eyes wet with tears of gratitude, holding my hand so tight her knuckles were white. "Oh, Mother Washington," she had gushed, her voice dripping with honey. "You are saving us. We will never be able to repay you. You will have the master suite on the main floor, the one with the garden view, so you never have to climb stairs. We will take care of you forever. You are the matriarch of this family." She called me Mother Washington back then. She brought me herbal tea and asked for my opinion on paint colors. She made me feel needed. She made me feel loved. But the ink was barely dry on the deed when the mask fell away and revealed the monster underneath. It did not happen gradually. It happened the very day the movers arrived. I stood in the foyer of the new house, the house my money had secured, watching the movers carry my bed toward the main floor suite. Tiffany stepped in front of them, her arms crossed her face, devoid of the warmth she had shown just 24 hours earlier. "Put that downstairs," she ordered them. I looked at her confused. But Tiffany, the agreement was the garden suite. My knees. She did not even look at me. "Plans changed, Odessa. I need the natural light for my yoga studio and meditation room. You will be in the lower level. It is more private down there. You won't be in our way." Lower level. It was a finished basement with one tiny window near the ceiling that looked out at the dirt. It was damp, it smelled of mildew, and it was freezing in the winter. That was the moment I knew I had made a terrible mistake. The sweet daughter-in-law vanished, replaced by a warden who saw me only as a walking ATM that had finally dispensed its last bill. From that day on, the rules tightened like a noose. No cooking in the main kitchen because she said my food smelled too ethnic and ruined her curtains. No visitors because it disturbed her feng shui. I watched my son Marcus the boy I raised to be a man stand by and let her strip away my dignity piece by piece just so he could keep the peace. I bought my own prison, Reginald. I whispered, my voice trembling with a rage I had suppressed for 5 long years. I paid $300,000 to be treated like an inmate in the home I financed. Reginald patted my hand, his grip firm. That ends tonight, Odessa. The lease on their cruelty has expired. As the Rolls-Royce glided effortlessly over the asphalt, I closed my eyes and the phantom smell of mildew instantly filled my nose, choking out the scent of the expensive leather seats. That basement. It was never a suite, it was a tomb. For 5 years I lived below the earth like a buried secret, while my money paid for the sunshine above. The walls wept with moisture. Black mold crept up the baseboards like a slow-moving poison painting, dark, jagged lines across the drywall that I was too weak to scrub away. I coughed constantly down there. It was a dry, hacking cough that rattled my chest and kept me awake through the lonely nights. I remembered one Tuesday last winter when the heating unit in the basement failed. It was 20 degrees outside, and inside my cell, my breath hung in the air like smoke. My arthritis flared in the damp cold, making every movement agony. I wrapped myself in 3 blankets, but the chill settled deep into my bones. I climbed the stairs that night, my knees popping and aching with every step, just to ask for a portable heater. I reached the landing and opened the door to the main house. The warmth hit me like a physical blow. The smell of cinnamon and roasted chicken wafted from the kitchen. It smelled like a home. It smelled like the life I had paid for but was forbidden to touch. But before I could take a single step into the hallway, Tiffany was there blocking my path. She wore a surgical mask covering half her face, but her eyes were wide with performative terror. "Stop right there, Odessa," she shrieked, holding up a hand as if I were a rabid dog. "Do not take another step. Listen to that cough. You are infectious. Do not bring your sickness up here. Leo is studying for his SATs. We cannot afford for him to get sick because of your poor hygiene. My hygiene." I was a woman who had run sterile operating rooms. I scrubbed my skin raw in that freezing shower stall downstairs, trying to wash away the smell of the cellar. But she made me feel dirty. She made me feel like a plague. "It is the mold, Tiffany," I had wheezed, clutching my chest to keep from coughing again. "The dampness is settling in my lungs. Please, I just need heat. It is freezing down there." She didn't offer a heater. She didn't offer a glass of water. She reached for a can of aerosol disinfectant spray and unleashed a cloud of chemicals directly at my face. "Go back down," she ordered, pointing at the dark stairs like a warden. "Quarantine yourself. If I hear that door open again, I am calling the health department to take you to the state isolation ward. They will put you in a plastic bubble where you belong." She slammed the door in my face. Then I heard the sharp click of the deadbolt. She locked me in. I sat on the bottom step that night, wrapped in my blankets, shivering not just from the cold, but from the absolute desolation of being unloved. I listened to their footsteps above my head, the muffled sounds of the television, the laughter. They were living their lives on top of my suffering. I realized then that the basement wasn't an oversight. It wasn't just about her yoga studio. It was an incubator for death. She wanted the pneumonia to take me. She wanted the cold to stop my heart so she could stop pretending to care. She was waiting for me to die so she could renovate the basement into a wine cellar. The crystal chandelier in the penthouse foyer cast a warm glow that should have been comforting, but I could not stop shivering. I sat on the velvet sofa, clutching my purse like a lifeline. Reginald poured me a glass of water, but I pushed it away. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small amber prescription bottle Tiffany had given me 3 months ago. There was no pharmacy label on it, just a piece of masking tape with her handwriting that read, "Mom's Memory Vitamins." I poured the pills onto the marble coffee table. They were small, round, and innocent-looking pale blue tablets that looked like candy. Reginald sat opposite me, his face grim. I pushed the pile toward him. "She is a pharmacist, Reggie," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and professional vindication. "She knows chemistry better than she knows her own husband. She told me these were herbal supplements to help with my aging brain. She said they would keep me sharp. But I am a former nursing director. I managed the ICU at Grady Memorial for 15 years. I know the difference between natural aging and induced symptoms." I looked Reginald in the eye. "I do not have a weak bladder. I never have. But 20 minutes after taking these, I would lose control of my bodily functions completely. And the fog. It wasn't just forgetfulness. It was a heavy chemical curtain that dropped over my mind, making my tongue heavy, and my thoughts wade through molasses. I wasn't getting old, Reginald. I was being drugged." Reginald picked up one of the pills with a pair of tweezers from his pocket kit. He didn't need to send it to a lab. He had brought his private physician, Dr. Vance, to the penthouse to examine me. Dr. Vance took the pill, examined the scoring on the side, and crushed it onto a chemical test strip. We waited in silence for 2 agonizing minutes. The strip turned a violent shade of purple, then bled into red. Dr. Vance looked up, his face pale. "This isn't herbal Odessa. This is furosemide, a high-ceiling loop diuretic, and it is mixed with a potent dose of alprazolam." I closed my eyes as the truth washed over me. Diuretics to force incontinence, sedatives to induce confusion, slurred speech, and memory loss. She wasn't just being mean. She was manufacturing a medical diagnosis. "It is a perfect recipe," Reginald said, his voice low and dangerous. "If she takes you to a doctor while you are on this cocktail, you would present with all the classic symptoms of advanced dementia and physical decline. The incontinence proves you cannot care for yourself. The confusion proves you cannot manage your affairs." "They were building a case," I whispered. "They were creating a paper trail of a senile, incompetent old woman. Tiffany didn't just want me out of the house. She wanted legal control. She wanted to be able to stand in front of a judge and say, 'Look, Your Honor, she wets herself. She doesn't know what day it is. She needs a guardian.' And because she is a licensed pharmacist, no one would question her. She used her oath to heal, to poison me slowly. She stole my dignity so she could eventually steal my signature." I looked at the blue pills scattered on the table. They weren't medicine, they were the keys to my coffin, and my son watched her hand them to me every single morning. The heavy bronze knocker on the penthouse door sounded at 2 a.m, a hollow thud that echoed through the silent apartment. I tightened my silk robe around my waist and motioned for Reginald to stay seated. I checked the security monitor, expecting to see building security, or perhaps a police officer delivering bad news. Instead, I saw a soaked gray hoodie and a pair of terrified eyes looking up at the camera. It was Leo. I threw the door open. My sweet, brilliant 16-year-old grandson stood there shivering, his sneakers covered in mud, his backpack clutched to his chest like a shield. He looked so much like Marcus did at that age, before the greed and the alcohol bloated his face, but Leo had a kindness in his eyes that his father never possessed. "Grandma," he sobbed, collapsing into my arms the moment he saw me. I pulled him inside, shutting out the cold night air. He smelled like rain and fear. I held him tight, rocking him back and forth, just as I did when he was a baby, and Tiffany was too busy with her social life to hold him. "I am here, Leo," I whispered, stroking his damp hair. "You are safe now. Why did you run away, baby? You should be in bed." He pulled away, wiping his nose on his sleeve. He looked frantic. "I could not stay there, Grandma. Not after what they did. Not after what they said when they thought you were gone." He unzipped his backpack with trembling hands and pulled out a silver laptop. "I did not just run away. I stole this. It is Dad's work computer, but I synced it to Mom's cloud account. I hid in the pantry after you got in the Rolls-Royce. I recorded them, Grandma. I recorded everything." He placed the laptop on the coffee table and opened a file. The audio quality was crisp. I heard the pop of a cork. Champagne. They were celebrating. My son and his wife were having a party less than an hour after throwing me onto the street. "Ding dong, the witch is dead." Tiffany's voice rang out from the speakers, shrill with excitement. "I cannot believe she actually left. I thought we would have to call the sheriff." "She is gone, babe," Marcus replied, and hearing the relief in his voice cut me deeper than any knife. "The room is yours. The basement is yours. We are free." But Leo fast-forwarded the track, his young fingers flying over the keyboard. "Listen to this part, Grandma. This is why they kicked you out tonight. This is the real reason." The audio resumed, but the tone had changed. It was hushed urgent. "The realtor is coming at 9 in the morning," Marcus said. "We need to stage the house perfectly. If we can get a cash offer by noon, we can close in 10 days. "But what about her name on the deed?" Tiffany asked. "Do not worry about that," Marcus snapped. "I have the power of attorney paperwork. I practiced her signature all week. It looks perfect. The notary owes me a favor. We sell the house, we pay off the loan shark, and we walk away with the equity." Leo paused the recording. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "They are selling the house tomorrow morning, Grandma. Dad owes money. Bad money. $200,000 to some guys who threatened to break his legs. That is why they needed you gone. They could not show the house with you in it. They are going to sell your home and forge your name to do it." I looked at the boy sitting before me. He was 16 years old. He should be worrying about prom dates and algebra tests. Instead, he was acting as a corporate spy in his own home, stealing evidence to save his grandmother from his own parents. My heart broke for his loss of innocence, but it swelled with pride for his courage. He was not Marcus's son in that moment. He was mine. He had the Washington spine. I closed the laptop gently. "You did good, Leo. You did so good." I looked over at Reginald, who was already on his phone mobilizing his legal team. "They want to sell my house tomorrow," I said, my voice calm and deadly. "Let them try. They are about to find out that the name on that deed does not belong to a victim. It belongs to the woman who owns the bank." "Pass the iPad, babe." Tiffany chirped, her voice light and bubbly like champagne bubbles. She was lounging on the silk chaise in the living room, the one she had forbidden me to sit on, because she claimed my clothes were dusty. She kicked her feet up, scrolling through a luxury fashion website with a manic intensity. "I have been eyeing this Birkin for 6 months, Marcus. $30,000. It is not even a purchase. It is an investment, and we deserve investments, don't we, after what we have been through?" Marcus sat at the dining table nursing a tumbler of scotch, his eyes glazed over. He nodded eagerly, desperate to keep the smile on her face. "You deserve everything, Tiff," he said, his voice thick with unearned bravado. "Get the bag. Get 2. Once the house closes next week, we are going to be sitting on $500,000 in cash. We can burn through $100,000 and still have enough to flip that condo in Buckhead you wanted. I want Paris," Tiffany declared, dropping the tablet to clap her hands together. "First class. None of that economy nonsense. I want to stay at the Ritz. I want to walk down the Champs-Élysées without dragging that old anchor around. Can you imagine how free we are going to feel? No more smelling her liniment oil. No more listening to her humming those awful gospel songs while she cleans." Marcus laughed, but it was a nervous, hollow sound. He was sweating despite the air conditioning. He knew about the $200,000 he owed to men who broke kneecaps for a living, but he could not tell his wife that her Birkin bag was actually blood money. Instead, he poured himself another drink and played the part of the conquering hero. "She is probably sitting in the intake room at the state facility right now," he scoffed, swirling the amber liquid. Confused, scared, wondering why her son has not come to save her. Well, she is going to be waiting a long time. I signed the drop-off papers as John Doe. They do not even know who to call. She is a ward of the state now, Tiffany. A number in a file. She has no money, no phone, and nobody who cares enough to look for her. We are ghosts to her. Rich, happy ghosts. Tiffany walked over and straddled his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You are so strong, baby," she purred, kissing his forehead. "You finally did what needed to be done. You cut off the dead weight. Now we can finally live the life we were meant for. A Mercedes G-Wagon for you, the platinum card for me. We are going to rule this suburb, Marcus. Everyone who looked down on us is going to see us in that new car and know that the Washingtons have arrived." They toasted their glasses, the crystal clinking with a sharp, clear note. They drank to their future, to their greed, and to the demise of the woman who had birthed the man holding the glass. They sat there in the house I bought on the furniture I paid, for planning a vacation with my equity, believing with absolute arrogance that they had won. They truly believed I was a helpless, senile old woman rotting in a state shelter. They had no idea that while they were browsing for handbags, I was sitting in a penthouse suite instructing my lawyers to buy the very debt that was hanging over their heads. They thought they were kings and queens of the castle, but they were just squatters living on borrowed time, and the eviction notice was already being printed. The heels of Tiffany's designer stilettos clicked sharply against the marble floor of the First National Bank, creating a rhythm of arrogant entitlement that echoed through the quiet lobby. She wore a pristine white suit and oversized sunglasses, pushing them up into her hair as she approached the counter with the air of a woman who had never been told no in her life. She slapped a leather folder onto the mahogany desk. Inside was the power of attorney document Marcus had practiced forging for 3 nights straight. It looked perfect. The seal was embossed. The signature wavered just enough to look like an old woman's hand, and the notary stamp was crisp. "I need to make a withdrawal from the Odessa Washington Trust," she told the teller, her voice pitched loud enough for the people in line behind her to hear. "My poor mother-in-law. Her dementia has advanced so rapidly. We need to transfer $500,000 to a secure account to pay for her specialized memory care facility. It is heartbreaking, really, but someone has to take charge." The teller, a young woman with sharp eyes, did not smile. She took the document and typed something into her computer. Her frown deepened. "One moment, Mrs. Washington. I need to get the branch manager." Tiffany checked her watch, tapping her foot impatiently. She was already mentally spending the money. The Paris trip, the renovations, the down payment on the condo. She adjusted her diamond earrings, checking her reflection in the plexiglass. She looked the part. The grieving, dutiful daughter-in-law. Mr. Henderson, the branch manager, walked out of his glass office. He was a man Odessa had banked with for 30 years, a man who had been to her Christmas parties, a man who knew exactly who signed the checks. He did not extend his hand. He did not offer a seat. He stood behind the counter, his face a mask of professional coldness, holding the forged document by the corner as if it were contaminated waste. "Mrs. Washington," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made the air in the lobby grow heavy, "we cannot honor this request." Tiffany let out a scoff of disbelief, playing her role to the hilt. "Excuse me, did you not hear me? She is sick. She is incapable of managing her own finances. I am her pharmacist and her caregiver. I know what is best for her. If you do not release those funds, you are endangering a vulnerable senior citizen. I will sue this bank for negligence." Mr. Henderson leaned forward, planting his hands on the counter. He lowered his voice, but the intensity behind it was terrifying. "Mrs. Washington, I suggest you lower your voice. The account holder, Odessa Washington, was in my office at 8 o'clock this morning. She sat in that chair right there. She drank a cup of coffee with me. She was lucid, articulate, and very specific about her instructions." Tiffany's face went slack. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her makeup looking like a mask on a corpse. "That is impossible," she stammered. She is confused. She doesn't know what she is doing." Mr. Henderson slid the forged document back across the marble. She knew exactly what she was doing when she froze all her assets and flagged her accounts for suspicious activity. She explicitly warned us that a family member might attempt a transaction using falsified medical claims. He tapped the paper with his index finger. "We have high-definition cameras recording your face right now. We have your signature on the withdrawal slip. And we have the real signature of the account holder on file. They do not match." Tiffany felt the eyes of every person in the lobby burning into her back. The security guard by the door took a step forward, his hand resting on his belt. The air in the bank suddenly felt thin, insufficient to fill her lungs. "I suggest you leave, Mr. Henderson," said his voice, dropping to a whisper that sounded like a thunderclap, "before I am forced to press the silent alarm and have the police explain the penalties for bank fraud to you." Tiffany snatched the papers off the counter, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped them. Her carefully constructed facade of the wealthy, dutiful wife crumbled into the raw panic of a criminal caught in the act. She turned and walked fast toward the revolving doors, her heels clicking frantically, not looking back, terrified that at any second she would feel a hand on her shoulder. She had walked in demanding a fortune. She walked out knowing she was being hunted. The phone vibrated against the granite countertop like a trapped insect buzzing violently against the stone. Marcus stared at the screen, his heart hammering against his ribs like a bird trying to break free of a cage. A known caller. He knew exactly who it was. He grabbed the phone and ducked into the pantry, closing the door behind him and huddling in the dark among the gourmet pasta sauces and expensive spices he could not afford. "Hello?" he whispered, his voice trembling so hard he could barely form the word. "Mr. Washington," the voice on the other end was calm, terrifyingly smooth, like oil sliding over a blade. "You are hard to reach. We do not like it when our friends are hard to reach." "I am here," Marcus stammered, sweat beading on his forehead instantly. "I am here. I am getting the money. My mother is gone. The house is empty. We are listing it tomorrow. I do not care about your domestic arrangements, Marcus. I care about my $200,000. You have 48 hours. 48. Marcus choked. "But closing takes time. Even a cash offer takes a week. I need more time. Please. I am good for it. You know I am good for it." The laugh on the other end was dry and humorless. "We know you are a sales manager with a maxed-out credit line and a gambling addiction, Marcus. We know you owe us. If the money is not in the bag by noon on Friday, we start taking collateral. And since you do not have any assets left, we will start with physical collateral. A finger for every hour you are late. Do you understand?" Click. The line went dead. Marcus slid down the wall, his expensive suit trousers bunching up as he hit the floor. He looked at his hands, his soft, manicured hands that had never done a day of hard labor in his life. He imagined them broken. He imagined the pain. He retched dry heaving into the silence of the pantry. He was a dead man walking. He had told Tiffany he was investing in cryptocurrency, that he was a financial visionary. In reality, he had gambled away their savings and then borrowed from the kind of men who did not send late notices. If Tiffany found out, she would not just leave him, she would destroy him. She would look at him with that sneer she usually reserved for his mother. The front door slammed. Marcus scrambled up, wiping the sweat from his face with his sleeve, trying to compose a mask of authority. Tiffany stormed into the kitchen, throwing her designer purse onto the island. She looked furious, her face twisted in a snarl. Marcus burst out of the pantry. "Did you get it? Did you get the cash? Get it!" she shrieked, turning on him. "I nearly got arrested." The bank manager froze the account. "Your mother flagged it. She locked us out, Marcus. We have nothing. Not a dime." The room spun. Marcus gripped the edge of the island to keep from falling. No cash, no way to pay the debt. 48 hours. The panic rose in his throat like bile. He grabbed Tiffany by the shoulders, his fingers digging into her silk blouse. "Then we sell the house," he said, his voice high and frantic. "Call the realtor. Tell her to drop the price. Drop it by 50,000. Drop it by 100,000. I do not care. We need a cash buyer and we need one today." "Are you insane?" Tiffany pulled away, staring at him. "We cannot drop the price. We need that equity for the Paris trip for the new condo. We wait for the right offer." "We do not wait." Marcus screamed, slamming his hand on the counter. "We sell it now. The market is crashing, Tiffany. I saw the reports. If we do not sell in 48 hours, this house will be worthless. We have to dump it." He was lying. He was lying to his wife to save his own skin, covering his addiction with manufactured panic. He was a coward willing to burn down his entire financial future just to keep his kneecaps intact. He watched Tiffany pull out her phone, her eyes wide with confusion and greed, and he knew he had won. He would sell his mother's legacy for pennies on the dollar, just to buy himself another week of pretending to be a man. The view from the top floor of the Graves and Washington building usually gave me a sense of peace. But today, the Atlanta skyline looked like a jagged set of broken teeth biting into the gray sky. I sat in my leather executive chair, swiveling slightly to look at Reginald, who stood by the window holding a thin dossier as if it were a loaded weapon. He had done what I asked. He had found the source of Marcus's panic. "They are called the Viper Syndicate," Reginald said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. "They operate out of a warehouse in Decatur. High-interest illegal gambling debts, and they are not known for their patience. Marcus owes them $200,000 Odessa. The deadline is 48 hours away. If he does not pay, they will not just hurt him, they will likely kill him. I closed my eyes, and for a split second, I saw Marcus as a toddler running across the grass at our old estate, his laughter bright and innocent. How did we get here? How did the boy I raised with Sunday school verses and homemade peach cobbler turn into a man who gambled his life away and tried to sell his mother to cover the losses? My heart ached, a physical throb in the center of my chest that felt like a heart attack, but I knew it was just grief. Grief for the living. I opened the top drawer of my mahogany desk and pulled out my personal checkbook. The leather cover was soft under my fingers, warm and familiar. I uncapped my fountain pen, the gold nib gleaming under the office lights. "Call them Reginald," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hand. "Tell them we are buying the debt. Full amount cash wire transfer within the hour. But I want the promissory note assigned to me. I want to be the sole holder of his liability." Reginald stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Odessa, are you sure? You are clearing his ledger. You are saving him again, after everything he did to you." I looked up at my oldest friend and shook my head slowly. "No, Reggie, I am not saving him. If the syndicate holds the debt, they will break his legs or put a bullet in his head. That is a quick ending. It is too easy." I signed the check, the ink flowing dark and permanent onto the paper. The signature was sharp, aggressive. It was not the signature of a mother writing a birthday card. It was the signature of a CEO executing a hostile takeover. I tore the check from the book, the ripping sound loud in the quiet office. "I am not saving him," I repeated, sliding the check across the polished wood. "I am owning him. When I hold this debt, I control his fate." He wanted to sell my home to pay this off. He wanted to throw me away to save his own skin. Now he does not owe a faceless criminal organization. He owes me. He owes the woman he evicted. He owes the mother he called a burden. Reginald took the check, looking at it with a mixture of fear and respect. "You are going to foreclose on your own son." I stood up, walking to the window to look down at the city where my son was currently scrambling like a rat in a maze, terrified and alone. "I am going to teach him the lesson he should have learned 20 years ago," I whispered, pressing my hand against the cold glass. "You cannot spend what you do not earn, Marcus, and you certainly cannot sell what is not yours. Buy the debt, Reginald." I want to see the look on his face when he realizes the shark swimming in the water with him is his own mother. The house I had paid for with my life savings was transformed into a stage for the most desperate performance of Tiffany's life. Even though their bank accounts were frozen and their credit cards were screaming at the limit, she had somehow managed to hire a high-end catering crew. I watched from the hidden camera feed Leo had set up in the living room as servers in white coats passed trays of lobster puffs and caviar to a room full of people who would not spit on Tiffany if she were on fire. She had invited everyone who mattered. The chief of staff from her hospital, Dr. Abernathy, the president of the Homeowners Association, and a dozen women from her tennis club who she desperately wanted to impress. Tiffany stood in the center of the room, wearing a shimmering sequined gown that dipped low in the back. She held a glass of champagne like a scepter, laughing too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. She was glowing with the manic energy of a gambler who had bet the house on a single spin of the wheel. She had stripped the living room of every trace of me. My antique clock was gone. The throw blankets I had knitted were replaced with cold, modern art pieces. She had erased my existence to make room for her lie. "Oh yes, Dr. Abernathy," she cooed, touching the arm of the hospital director. "We are absolutely heartbroken to leave this place, but Marcus received an offer in Paris that we simply could not refuse. International expansion, you know how it is. We accepted a cash offer on the house just this morning. $50,000 over asking price. We close in 2 days, and then it is bonjour, France." She was lying through her veneers. There was no offer. There was no Paris. There was only a foreclosure notice sitting on Reginald's desk and a mountain of debt. But Tiffany was a master of the delusion. She believed if she said it loud enough and wore enough diamonds, it would become true. She was selling a fantasy to her boss, hoping that the appearance of wealth would somehow protect her from the reality of her crimes. "And what about Marcus's mother?" Dr. Abernathy asked, sipping his drink. "I thought she was living with you." Tiffany's face twisted into a mask of tragic sorrow. "Oh, it was terrible," she sighed. "The dementia took over so fast. She became violent. We had to move her to a state facility for her own safety. It broke our hearts, but we simply could not have that kind of chaos in our lives anymore." Marcus, however, could not act. He stood by the patio doors clutching a whiskey sour so hard I thought the glass would shatter. He was not looking at the guests. He was staring at the driveway, watching the street. He was terrified. The 48-hour deadline from the loan sharks was ticking down. He checked his watch every 30 seconds, wiping sweat from his upper lip. He looked like a man waiting for the executioner to pull the lever. He knew the men coming for him would not care about lobster puffs or sequined dresses. When Tiffany glided over to him, she pinched his arm hard, her smile never wavering for the guests. "Smile, you idiot," she hissed through her teeth. "Dr. Abernathy is looking at you. Stop sweating. You look guilty." "I am guilty." "Tiff," Marcus whispered, his eyes darting around the room. "We do not have the money. The buyers didn't sign. The syndicate's defy dates are tonight. We are throwing a party in a house we do not own with money we do not have." "Shut up," Tiffany snapped, smoothing his lapel. "We have appearances to maintain. If we look successful, the money will follow. Just drink your drink and nod. Tonight is about me. It is my birthday, and I refuse to let your incompetence ruin my moment." She turned away from him, raising her glass to the room. "Everyone, may I have your attention, please? I want to propose a toast to new beginnings and to leaving the heavy baggage of the past behind." The guests cheered, raising their glasses, unaware that the baggage she was talking about was me. I watched on the screen, sitting in the silence of the penthouse, and felt a cold calm settle over me. "Enjoy your champagne, Tiffany. It is the last expensive thing you will taste for a very long time. To a future without burdens," Tiffany announced, clinking her crystal glass against Dr. Abernathy's flute, her eyes shining with the manic glaze of victory. That was the cue. The heavy oak front door did not just open. It was thrown wide with a force that rattled the hinges and sent a draft of humid night air rushing into the climate-controlled fantasy she had built. I stepped onto the marble foyer. I was not the hunched, shuffling old woman in a stained bathrobe they had evicted 3 days ago. I was Odessa Mae Washington. I wore a floor-length crimson silk gown that hugged my frame, a dress I had commissioned in Paris 20 years ago and had saved for the opera, but now wore for war. Around my neck, the 30-carat diamond necklace my late husband had commissioned in Italy glittered under the chandelier, casting sharp prisms of light that seemed to blind the guests. I did not have a cane. I did not have a walker. I stood tall in my heels, my spine made of steel, and my head held high. Flanking me were 2 men. On my left, Reginald Graves, holding a leather briefcase like a weapon. On my right, Sheriff Miller in full uniform, his hand resting casually on his belt, his badge catching the light. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. The jazz music stopped. The chatter died instantly. A server dropped a tray of champagne flutes, the glass shattering with a violence that made everyone jump, but no one looked at the mess on the floor. Every single pair of eyes was locked on me. Tiffany's face went from porcelain to ash in a heartbeat. Her eyes bulged and her jaw went slack. She dropped her glass, splashing expensive wine onto Dr. Abernathy's shoes, but she didn't even notice. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost rising from the grave to drag her down to hell. She escaped. Tiffany shrieked, her voice cracking into a hysterical soprano that grated against the silence. "Oh my God," she broke out of the facility. "She is violent. Someone call security. Get her out. She is having an episode. She is dangerous." She pointed a shaking finger at me, backing away, until she hit the buffet table, nearly knocking over the ice sculpture. "Do not let her near me," she screamed, looking around wildly for support. "She is crazy. She thinks she owns this place. Call the police." I did not shout. I did not run. I simply began to walk. The crowd of wealthy socialites and doctors parted for me like the Red Sea. They stared at my diamonds. They stared at the sheriff walking in step with me. They stared at the woman who was supposed to be a senile invalid rotting in a state ward, but who looked like an empress returning to her throne. Marcus was pressed against the patio door, shaking his head mutely, his face glistening with sweat. He saw the sheriff. He saw Reginald. He saw the cold clarity in my eyes. He knew. I stopped in the center of the room directly under the chandelier. I looked at Dr. Abernathy, who was staring at me with his mouth hanging open. "I apologize for the interruption." "Doctor," I said, my voice projecting clear and strong, reaching every corner of the room without a microphone. "But I believe there has been a terrible misunderstanding about who exactly owns this house. Leo, honey, if you would be so kind." I gestured toward the back of the room. My grandson stepped out from the shadows of the DJ booth holding a laptop like a judge holding a gavel. He did not look at his parents. He looked at me with a nod of solidarity that broke my heart and healed it all at the same time. He pressed a single key. A massive projection screen descended from the ceiling behind the stage, cutting off the view of the pool. The room dimmed as the projector hummed to life. A video feed filled the wall, grainy but crystal clear in its content. It was the kitchen island. The date stamp in the corner read 3 days ago. The entire room watched in horrified silence as Tiffany appeared on screen wearing her pharmacist coat. She was humming a happy tune as she opened a bottle of pills. She poured a handful into a mortar and pestle. The camera zoomed in digitally. They were the blue pills, the diuretics and sedatives. She crushed them into a fine powder with a rhythmic grinding motion that echoed through the ballroom speakers. Then she dumped the entire amount into my favorite ceramic teapot, stirred it vigorously, and smiled directly at the hidden camera she did not know existed. "That is a lie," Tiffany screamed, lunging toward the screen, as if she could physically tear the image down. "That is a deep fake. He made that with AI. He is trying to frame me." But Leo was not done. The video cut to black, and then the audio started. It was Marcus's voice booming through the surround sound system, clear and undeniable. "I do not care if she rots in there, Tiff. Just get her out. We need the money. She is dead weight. If she dies in the nursing home, it just speeds up the inheritance." The gasp that went through the crowd sucked the air out of the room. This was not just a family dispute. This was a confession. I watched the faces of Tiffany's carefully curated guests. The women from the tennis club were backing away from her, clutching their pearls and purses, looking at her as if she were contagious. The president of the Homeowners Association looked physically ill. Dr. Abernathy, the man Tiffany had been trying so desperately to impress, stood frozen. He looked from the screen to Tiffany, his face twisting from confusion to absolute revulsion. He was a doctor. He knew exactly what he had just seen on that screen. He saw a medical professional using her knowledge to poison a vulnerable woman. "You poisoned her," Dr. Abernathy whispered, but in the silence it sounded like a shout. "You used your license to drug your own mother-in-law to simulate dementia." "No," Tiffany wailed, grabbing his arm. "You do not understand. She is sick. She needs help." "That was just vitamins." "Get your hands off me!" Dr. Abernathy barked, shaking her off with a violence that made her stumble. I stepped forward, taking the microphone again. My voice was calm, the eye of the storm. "You invited these people here to celebrate your success, Tiffany. You wanted them to see your beautiful home and your perfect life. Well, now they see the truth. They see that this house is built on a foundation of elder abuse and attempted murder. They see that your success is nothing but a syringe full of poison and a son willing to sell his mother for a gambling debt." Marcus had collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands, sobbing. But it was not the crying of a man who was sorry. It was the crying of a man who knew his life was over. Tiffany looked around the room, her eyes wild, searching for one friendly face, one person who would believe her lie. She found no one. Her perfect social standing had evaporated in less than 3 minutes, leaving her exposed as the predator she truly was. Dr. Abernathy stepped closer to the projection screen, his face pale under the ballroom lights. He stared at the freeze-frame image of the amber bottle in Tiffany's hand. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his reading glasses, putting them on with a slow, deliberate motion that felt like a judge preparing to read a death sentence. He pointed a shaking finger at the inventory code visible on the label in the high-definition video. "That is lot number 492, he said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "We reported 2 bottles of high-potency furosemide and alprazolam missing from the secure inventory last week. I signed the loss report myself, thinking it was a clerical error." He turned slowly to face Tiffany. She was backed against the buffet table, knocking over a silver tray of appetizers, her hands shaking so hard her bracelets rattled like shackles. "Dr. Abernathy, please listen to me," she stammered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "It was a misunderstanding. I borrowed it for. You stole controlled medication from your place of employment to chemically restrain a geriatric family member." Dr. Abernathy cut her off, his voice booming through the silent room. "You violated every oath you took. Tiffany Washington, you are terminated effective immediately. Do not bother coming in to clear out your desk. Security will box up your personal effects and leave them on the curb." But he was not finished. He took a step closer to her, looming over her shrinking figure. "And tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, I am personally filing a report with the State Board of Pharmacy. I will submit this video evidence myself, along with the toxicology report Mrs. Washington's lawyer provided. You will never dispense another pill in this state. You will never wear a white coat again. You are a disgrace to the profession, and I will make it my personal mission to ensure you are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." It was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping. Tiffany let out a strangled sob, falling to her knees on the expensive rug she had bragged about buying. Her entire identity was wrapped up in her career, in being the successful professional woman who looked down on everyone else. In less than 5 minutes, she had been stripped naked socially and professionally. She looked up, her mascara running in black streaks down her face, making her look like a broken doll. She crawled toward Dr. Abernathy, reaching for his pant leg, but he stepped back as if she were radioactive. It was him, she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus, who was still slumped in his chair. "He made me do it. He said she was a burden. He said we needed the money for his gambling debts. I did not want to hurt her. I just wanted him to stop yelling at me." "Please, doctor, do not take my license. It is all I have." Marcus looked up, then his eyes dead. "You told me the pills were herbal, Tiffany. You told me you were helping her. Liar!" she shrieked, lunging at her husband, clawing at his face. "You coward! You bankrupt loser! You ruined everything!" The security guard stepped in, pulling them apart. I stood there watching them turn on each other like rats in a sinking ship. There was no loyalty here. There was no love. There was only greed and fear, and now there was nothing left but the wreckage of their own making. I looked at Reginald and nodded. It was time for the final blow. "Enough," Marcus shouted, his voice cracking as he tried to salvage the shredded remains of his dignity. He stepped over his weeping wife, ignoring her outstretched hand, and marched toward me. "You have made your point, Mother. You ruined Tiffany's career. You humiliated us. Are you happy now? Now get out! Get out of my house before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. This deed still has my name on it." I did not move. I did not flinch. I simply held out my hand to Reginald, who placed a thick blue folder into my palm. It was heavy with the weight of consequences. "Actually, Marcus," I said, my voice slicing through the tension like a scalpel, "that is where you are mistaken. You see, I had a very interesting conversation with a gentleman named Mr. Viper this afternoon. He seemed quite anxious about a $200,000 gambling debt that you were supposed to settle by noon today." Marcus froze. His face went from red to a sickly shade of gray. His eyes darted to the windows as if he expected hitmen to burst through the glass. "How do you know about that?" he whispered, his bravado evaporating instantly. "Because I bought it," I replied casually, tossing the folder onto the coffee table in front of him. "I paid him. Cash, principal and interest." Marcus stared at the folder as if it were a bomb. He reached out with a trembling hand and flipped it open. His eyes scanned the documents, the assignment of debt, the promissory note, and the transfer of Lien. "You bought my debt," he choked out, looking up at me with horror. "You paid off the loan sharks, so I do not owe them anymore." "No, Marcus," I said, stepping closer until I was towering over him. "You do not owe them. You owe me, and unlike those criminals who might have broken your legs, I am a businesswoman. I follow the law." I pointed to the clause highlighted in yellow at the bottom of the page. "Read the fine print, son. The terms of the loan you signed were predatory. In the event of a default, which occurred at 12:01 today, the lender has the right to immediate acceleration and foreclosure on all collateral assets. I leaned in close, my voice dropping to a whisper that terrified him more than any shout. "You put this house up as collateral, Marcus. You forged my signature on the deed transfer to do it, but the lien is valid against your half of the equity. And since I already own the other half and I now own your debt, I am exercising my right to immediate possession." Marcus backed away, shaking his head. "No, you cannot do that. You are my mother. You cannot foreclose on your own son. You evicted your own mother." I snapped, my patience finally snapping. "You threw me out like garbage. You tried to sell my home to pay for your mistakes. Well, now the tables have turned. This house is not yours. It never was. It was paid for with my sweat and my sacrifice." I straightened up, looking around the room at the silent guests, the ruined party, the shattered lives. "This house is mine, Marcus," I declared, my voice ringing with finality, "and I am evicting you. You have 30 minutes to pack a bag and get out of my property." And Marcus. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face, a broken man who had lost everything. "Do not take the silver." I counted it. The security guards stepped forward, their hands resting on their belts, ready to enforce the will of the true owner. Marcus looked at Tiffany, who was still sobbing on the floor, then at the door, then at me. He realized then that there was no mercy coming. There was only justice, cold and hard as the diamond around my neck. Sheriff Miller nodded to his deputies, and the room seemed to shrink as the air filled with the jingle of heavy metal keys and the rustle of leather holsters. They moved on Tiffany first. She tried to run back toward the kitchen, but 2 officers blocked her path. "Tiffany Washington, you are under arrest for first-degree elder abuse forgery and possession of controlled substances with intent to do harm." The words hung in the air like smoke. She screamed a high, thin sound that grated against the crystal chandeliers as they pulled her arms behind her back. "Watch the dress," she shrieked, thrashing against the cuffs. "This is silk. You are ruining it." Even in her final moments of freedom, she was worried about fabric instead of her soul. Then they turned to Marcus. He did not run. He did not fight. He looked at the handcuffs, and then he looked at me. The realization that this was not a dream, that his mother was not going to save him, finally crashed down on him. He collapsed. He did not just sit down. He fell to his knees on the marble floor, sliding forward until he was clutching the hem of my crimson gown. "Mama, please." He sobbed, his tears soaking into the expensive silk. "Mama, do not let them take me. I am your son. I am your baby. You cannot send your baby to prison. They will kill me in there. Please, Mama, I am sorry. I will do anything. I will sign whatever you want. Just tell them to stop." I looked down at the man weeping at my feet. I searched my heart for that familiar tug of maternal instinct, that urge to protect him that had driven me to pay for his mistakes for 40 years. I waited to feel the guilt. I waited to feel the pity. But there was nothing, just a hollow, cold silence where my love used to be. I stepped back, pulling my dress from his grasp with a sharp tug. "Get up, Marcus," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You are wrinkling my gown." He looked up at me, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. "Mama, how can you be so cold?" "Cold," I repeated, looking him dead in the eye. "Cold is sleeping in a damp basement for 5 years because your son is too weak to stand up to his wife. Cold is being thrown out on the street with nothing but a suitcase while your son celebrates with champagne. You taught me how to be cold, Marcus. You were an excellent teacher. But I am your son," he wailed, reaching for me again. "No," I said, signaling the deputies to take him. My son died the night he watched his wife poison his mother and did nothing to stop it. You are just a stranger who owes me money. And strangers do not get mercy. They get consequences." The deputies hauled him to his feet. He screamed my name as they dragged him toward the door, his shoes squeaking on the floor he had been so proud to own. I did not look away. I watched him go. I watched the door close. And for the first time in years, I took a breath that did not hurt. The gavel came down in family court with a sound that felt more like a liberation bell than a legal ruling. With Marcus and Tiffany both denied bail due to the severity of the charges and the flight risk, the judge did not hesitate. Temporary guardianship was granted to me immediately, with permanent custody proceedings fast-tracked. I signed the papers with a steady hand, feeling the weight of the pen, sealing a promise to protect the only good thing that had come out of my son's marriage. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright Atlanta afternoon. Leo was quiet. He was wearing a suit I had bought him for the hearing, and he looked older than his 16 years. He had grown up in a war zone learning to be a spy and a protector before he ever learned how to drive. He kept looking over his shoulder as if he expected his father to burst through the doors and drag him back to that house of lies. "You do not have to look back, Leo," I said, squeezing his shoulder. "They cannot touch you. You are a Washington now. My Washington." We drove to the penthouse in the Rolls-Royce. This time when we arrived, I did not have James take his bags to the guest room. I led him to the east wing of the apartment, a section I had closed off years ago because it felt too big for one woman. "This is your space now," I told him, stopping in front of a set of double mahogany doors. "No one enters without your permission. Not the staff, not the guests, not even me. You deserve privacy, Leo. You deserve peace." He pushed the doors open and stopped dead in his tracks. I had spent the last 48 hours working with an interior designer and a tech consultant. I knew my grandson. I knew he was not interested in sports memorabilia or fancy sneakers. The room was sleek and modern with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city he had helped me conquer. But it was the adjoining room that made his jaw drop. I had converted the study into a state-of-the-art technology lab. There was a custom-built desk with a triple monitor setup, a dedicated server rack with industrial-grade cooling, and a 3D printer in the corner. It was a setup that would make a Silicon Valley engineer jealous. For me, he whispered, walking into the room as if he were entering a cathedral. He ran his hand over the keyboard, his fingers trembling slightly. "You used your talent to save my life," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "You hid in closets and hacked into clouds to protect your grandmother. You should never have had to do that. You should have been building apps or designing robots. I want you to use this room to build the future Leo, not to fight a war in your own home." He turned to look at me, his eyes filling with tears. "Dad said computers were a waste of time. He said I should be playing football if I wanted to be a man." "Your father was a fool," I said sharply, crossing the room to cup his face in my hands. "Being a man is about integrity. It is about courage. You are twice the man he will ever be. And starting Monday, you are going to the Pace Academy. I already met with the headmaster. He saw your code samples. He wants you on the robotics team. You are going to be with people who understand your brilliance, Leo. You are going to fly." He collapsed into my arms, then the sobs finally breaking loose. It was the release of years of tension, years of walking on eggshells, years of being the adult in a house full of children. I held him tight, letting him cry into my shoulder, feeling the wetness of his tears wash away the last of the pain from my own heart. I had lost a son, yes. But as I held my grandson surrounded by the tools of his future, I knew I had saved the legacy. The Washington name would survive. It would skip the rot in the middle and grow strong and clean in the branches. The first rays of the Georgia sun broke over the skyline, painting the steel and glass of the city in hues of rose and gold. I sat on the private balcony of the penthouse wrapped in a cashmere shawl, watching the world wake up from 17 floors above. The air was crisp and clean, carrying none of the musty dampness of the basement that had been my prison for 5 years. In my hand, I held a delicate bone china cup filled with Earl Grey tea. I took a sip and savored the warmth. There were no crushed blue pills in the bottom. There was no chemical fog clouding my mind. There was only the taste of bergamot and the sweet, sharp flavor of absolute freedom. Across the small bistro table, Leo was tapping away on a new tablet I had bought him. He was not hacking into cloud accounts to find evidence of crimes anymore. He was not hiding in a closet recording his parents plotting my demise. He was designing a website for a local charity. He looked up and caught me watching him. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It was the first time I had seen him smile without a shadow of worry behind his eyes. "Did you sleep okay, Grandma?" he asked, his voice light and unburdened. "I slept like a baby," I replied. "And you?" "No nightmares," he said. "For the first time in forever, no nightmares." I looked back out at the city. Somewhere down there in a cold gray cell, Marcus was waking up on a steel cot, realizing that his arrogance had cost him his freedom. Somewhere in a detention center, Tiffany was waking up without her silk sheets and her high thread count lies, realizing that her medical license was gone forever. I waited for the pang of guilt to hit me. I waited for the mother in me to weep for her lost child, but the tears did not come. Instead, I felt a profound sense of peace. We are told that family is everything. We are taught that we must endure abuse, disrespect, and cruelty simply because we share DNA with the people hurting us. We are told to keep the peace even when that peace is killing us. But as I looked at my grandson, the boy I had saved from a toxic legacy, I realized that is a lie. Family is not about blood. It is about respect. It is about loyalty. It is about love that does not come with conditions or a price tag. I had to lose a son to save a grandson. It was a terrible price to pay, but looking at the bright future shining in Leo's eyes, I knew I would pay it again in a heartbeat. I had reclaimed my dignity. I had reclaimed my life. And I had taught the world that you should never underestimate a mother who has been pushed too far. We cannot choose the family we are born into, but we can choose the family we keep. I chose Leo. I chose myself. And I chose to live the rest of my days, not as a victim in a basement, but as the queen of my own castle. So that is my story. I would love to hear what you think. Do you believe I was too harsh on my own son, or was I right to cut him off completely to protect my grandson and myself? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more stories like mine. The most profound lesson from Odessa's journey is that dignity is non-negotiable even when it comes to family. We are often taught that a mother's love must be unconditional, an endless well of forgiveness regardless of how toxic the behavior becomes. However, this story shatters that myth, reminding us that enabling abuse is not love, it is self-destruction. Marcus and Tiffany mistook Odessa's silence for weakness and her generosity for obligation. They learned too late that the hand that feeds can also be the hand that signs the eviction notice. Odessa teaches us that true strength isn't just about endurance. It is about having the courage to draw a hard line in the sand. By cutting off her son, she didn't just save herself. She saved her grandson from a legacy of greed and moral bankruptcy. It proves that family isn't defined by DNA, but by mutual respect and care. Sometimes the only way to heal a family tree is to prune the rotten branches so the new growth can survive. If you believe that respect must be earned and that it is never too late to take back your power, hit that subscribe button and share this story with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength.